Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Shauna McGee from Kyoto News, and on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, we'd like to thank all of you for being here. I can't think of a better time to have you weigh in with different perspectives on what's going on in the disarmament world. Yesterday, we learned that there was a mysterious or not so mysterious meeting with Kim Jong-un and President Xi Jinping. We have a summit coming up with our President Trump and Mr. Kim, and we don't know the date and time yet, but a lot of interesting things are going on. So I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers, and then I'm going to move into reporter role to take notes myself, and then come back and help moderate on the Q&A session. So let me just briefly go down the line. We have Mr. John Burroughs, Jackie Cabasso, Holger Gusfeld.
Yes.
I got it right. Then we have Gene Seidman and Alan Ware, and they will each talk about different aspects of their expertise. So I will turn it over to you guys, and then be back when it's time for Q&A. Thank you again.
Thank you. In his major address on March 1st to Russia's Federal Assembly, President Vladimir Putin gave a detailed description, complete with video animations of an array of nuclear weapons delivery systems, including a nuclear-powered cruise missile and an underwater drone carrying massive nuclear ordnance. A month earlier, on February 2nd, the Trump administration released its nuclear posture review. It proposes two new capabilities, both aimed at Russia: a low-yield warhead deployed on submarine-launched missiles, and a sea-based nuclear-armed cruise missile. The review also lowers the threshold to use nuclear weapons, emphasizing the role of nuclear weapons in responding to non-nuclear strategic attacks, notably cyber attacks. Putin's speech and the U.S. nuclear posture review make clear that Russia and the United States are poised to resume nuclear arms racing on a scale not seen the dark days of the Cold War. Arms racing is dangerous in itself. It also is contrary to the Non-Proliferation Treaty obligation to negotiate, quote, cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date, close quote. Russia and the United States should seize every opportunity to put the threatened arms race in reverse. Moreover, the clear intent of both Russia and the U.S. is to maintain large, diversified nuclear forces for decades to come. That betrays a lack of good faith in relation to the Non-Proliferation Treaty obligation to negotiate the elimination of nuclear arsenals. The U.S. nuclear posture review fails to identify any concrete steps to pursue nuclear arms control and disarmament. The review does not even endorse extension of New START for 5 years when it expires in 2021, a step which Russia has supported. Both Russia's program and the nuclear posture review display a kind of contempt for treaty obligations and for international law generally. In non-proliferation treaty review meetings, the UN High-Level Conference on Nuclear Disarmament, and other forums, the international community must make clear that the Russian and U.S. postures are completely unacceptable. And as I have said, the two countries must find ways, bilaterally and multilaterally, to set an entirely different course towards a world free of nuclear weapons.
So this morning, I hand-delivered an open letter to President Donald Trump, President Moon Jae-in, and Chairman Kim Jong-un from 107 U.S. organizations. The letter starts out this way: as U.S. civil society groups and individuals deeply concerned about dangerous military tensions between our nation and the DPRK and the rising global risks of nuclear catastrophe, we wish to convey our deepest gratitude for the groundbreaking steps you have taken to begin the essential dialogue and diplomacy that must be undertaken if we are to prevent a war that would likely result in an unthinkable disaster for the Korean Peninsula, the United States, and the world. We fully support the upcoming Inter-Korean Summit in April and the U.S. DPRK Summit in May, and we urge you to patiently and diligently seek common ground. This open letter was initially spurred by the South Korean government's statement on the result of their special envoy's trip to the North on March 6th, and President Trump's immediate acceptance of Kim's offer to meet. The North made some rather remarkable offers in that meeting with South Korea, which are reflected in the letter. By all accounts, President Moon and Chairman Kim are very serious about reaching a peace accord of some kind and normalizing relations. The wild card is the United States. In light of the appointment as U.S. National Security Advisor of John Bolton, who in a March 1st Wall Street Journal op-ed called for a preemptive military strike on North Korea, this letter has taken on added significance. The open letter to President Trump, President Moon, and Chairman Kim is an unambiguous repudiation of Bolton's warmongering, with more than 100 peace, faith-based, professional, and Korean-American organizations across the country welcoming the extraordinary diplomatic opening that has appeared. In your packet, you will find a copy of the letter, and you will also find a letter to the editor of the Wall Street Journal by John Burroughs and my colleague Andy Lichterman, refuting Bolton's op-ed in which he called for a preemptive military strike on Korea. I'd want to just read a short excerpt from the letter. We deeply appreciate the DPRK's openness and flexibility that has enabled this process to move forward by pledging to refrain from conducting nuclear weapon or missile tests while the talks continue, and its readiness to address a course of denuclearization provided it is given assurances that security will be guaranteed. Moreover, the DPRK has not raised objections to the planned April joint U.S.-ROK military exercises. We are heartened by reports that U.S. aircraft carriers and possibly nuclear-powered submarines will not be participating in the upcoming joint military exercises. But in the spirit of the Olympic truce, we urge the U.S. and ROK to postpone the military exercises indefinitely, which would contribute significantly to creating a favorable environment in which to conduct peace talks. Ultimately, the United States must also address a course of denuclearization if the promise of peace is to be realized. If talks are successful, North Korea could in due course rejoin the 1970 Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, which promised the DPRK access to peaceful nuclear power in return for its promise never to acquire nuclear weapons. We also urge the U.S. to honor its NPT commitment made nearly 50 years ago to make good faith efforts to pursue nuclear disarmament by seeking negotiations with the other nuclear-armed states to achieve the promise of a world without nuclear weapons. When the NPT was extended indefinitely in 1995, the U.S. reaffirmed its pledge to undertake the determined pursuit of systematic and progressive efforts to reduce nuclear weapons globally with the ultimate goal of eliminating those weapons. And finally, your talks hold the promise of moving not only the region, but the entire world closer to realization of that most desirable outcome, in which there would no longer be a need for a menacing U.S. nuclear umbrella relied upon by the ROK and Japan, and a nuclear weapon-free zone in Northeast Asia would exist in a nuclear weapon-free world. With all best wishes for success.
Okay, I continue. My name is Holger Güssefeld. I'm from Germany, Hamburg, and I'm working for the World Future Council. The World Future Council is an internationally working NGO. The claim of it is Voice of Future Generations. That means that the World Future Council highlights good policies which are sustainable and presents these policies to other governments so that they learn from it. My job is their special projects, and I worked in the last time for disarmament. And I read the information somewhere that for nuclear weapons, $1 trillion are planned, or even more than $1 trillion are planned to be spent in the next decade from the 9 nuclear-armed countries. So that was very impressive, but I had no idea what $1 trillion are. So I started to calculate. And I found out if you count this money in high speed, 100 bills in a minute, dack, dack, dack. If you count it by hand, how long will it take? $1 trillion. It will take 190 years. 190 years. So nobody knows that. Nobody has the idea of this quantity of money with which people could do, the world could do many, many other things, like helping to end climate change and ending extreme poverty and hunger, and working to protect biodiversity and many other things. So I thought it could be a good action really to count this money. As we don't have the time, 190 years, I thought, okay, then we create a bill with a huger value. How much? It will be the value of $1 million. Each note has the value of $1 million. This is an artist who did this already. And this money we count, and on the other side of this bill should be demonstrated what the money could be used for. That means the first side is negative about nuclear war and the danger, and the other side is positive. And so the idea was that here in New York, also in the time of this conference, people count this money, hundreds of people, one person after the other, and it will take 7 days and 7 nights to count 1 million notes, each value $1 million. And this is what we go. We start on the 10th of May, and then going into the high-level conference and and informing the responsible politicians about this and what could be done with the money. So this is the main thing. In the moment we have not yet a venue confirmed, but we are negotiating. We will get that, and all other information you will get just before it begins. And Jean will speak about it, that there are different artists who design these bills. That's it. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Hello there. My name is Gene Seidman, and I'm a native New Yorker. I'm an art dealer, and I'm a social activist. I mean, how can anyone not be a social activist with this issue in front of us? So it was January 1st, and I had dinner in New York with Jonathan Granoff from Global Security Institute and Ben Cohen. And they engaged me to get involved in this project. So I'm the project manager for this project. And what we're doing is we're having the intersection of art and social action. So my role is to take Holger's great idea of counting the nuclear money and put it to life. Art has a way of expressing things that words cannot. And so we're talking to, this is Michael Green, a wonderful artist, prominent, internationally known artist who's done work for the Illustrated Rumi. So on one side, we have the horrors of nuclear war. On the other side, we have how the money could be used for, if it were reallocated for humanitarian purposes that Holger mentioned. So some of the artists that we have on board already, there's an artist, Karabek Koyukov, who is a nuclear non-proliferation activist from Kazakhstan. He grew up very close to where there were nuclear tests done He has no arms. He actually paints with a paintbrush in his mouth and paints that way. He'll be giving us some art. We also have a wonderful conceptual artist from Germany, Adi Hausler, who is creating some wonderful art. And then, of course, we have Robert Longo, internationally known American artist, who has said, art is an attempt to try and understand our own contemporary situation through making images that are completely personal while also addressing our social context. So we have a venue that will be very prominent during May, that we will begin to count the nuclear money. I invite all of you, not only in your role as journalists, but also as human beings, to help us count the nuclear money as well. Join us in May. And we're very enthusiastic and excited. We'll be announcing more artists from around the world, and we hope that you join us count the nuclear money. Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. My name's Alan. I'm Global Coordinator of Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, which is a cross-party network of legislators from nuclear-armed states, allied states, and non-nuclear states. And we work very closely with the interparliamentary bodies, such as the Interparliamentary Union, 178 member parliaments, and the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, 56 member parliaments. And in that we produce together the Parliamentary Action Plan for a Nuclear Weapons-Free World. The summary of this is in your folder. It's got 14 different actions that our network of legislators are active in. At least 3 of them are very relevant to today's press conference. One of those is on nuclear risk reduction, lowering nuclear thresholds, lowering the preparations to use nuclear weapons, and looking at nuclear doctrine. One of those is the UN High-Level Conference on Nuclear Disarmament, coming up May 14th to 16th, and how that can support nuclear non-proliferation, risk reduction, and disarmament measures, and give support to those wherever they're happening. Support to the summits that are happening on the North Korean situation, give support to the non-proliferation treaty review process. It gives support to the new subsidiary bodies that have started in the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva after 20 years of blockage. There's now a little glimmer of light there with the subsidiary working bodies starting again. And also another key area where we're working on is the issue of the financing of nuclear weapons, because the money is one of the key stimuluses to the ongoing nuclear arms race, the modernisation programs, and the rationale for keeping nuclear weapons and keeping the threat posture high is often put forward by those who get financial interests out of making these weapons. So that's why we've joined with partner organisations, World Future Council, International Peace Bureau, the Abolition 2000 Working Group on Economic Aspects of Nuclearism, and others to launch Move the Nuclear Weapons Money campaign. And that campaign looks at how to reduce the nuclear weapons budgets in the nuclear armed states, but also how to stop investments in nuclear weapons corporations. And they could be investments at government level. So already there are 4 countries, my own country, New Zealand, is one of those, that has ended government investments from public funds in corporations manufacturing nuclear weapons and delivery systems. It can also happen at city level, and it can also happen at individual level, with people looking at where their banks are investing nuclear weapons. So the campaign is quite broad. It looks at a range of ways that parliamentarians, civil society and governments can cooperate on reducing that lobbying power of the money that goes into the weapons and shifting those investments into economic, social and environmental need. And so that's why we're participating in the Count the Nuclear Weapons Money, which is a wonderful artistic rendition or expression of this idea, and will give support to those who are working on the issue of shifting the nuclear weapons money from nuclear weapons to other areas of need. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Okay. Let's open it up for questions, and could everybody just identify themselves? And please, for the interest of everyone else, keep your question focused. And does anyone want to start? Ariana?
Thank you, Ariana King with Nikkei. So I know you mentioned this upcoming, I assume that this is all going to be happening on the sidelines of the meeting. You start on the 10th, correct?
Yeah.
So just before the meeting starts?
4 days before, yes.
Right. What can you say about this meeting? I know that there are a lot of formats, the NPT Review Conference, the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. I know this is a follow-up to a 2013 meeting. What else can you say about what you expect from this meeting?
So what we know publicly is the aim of the high-level conference as expressed in the UN resolution, General Assembly resolution, which was adopted last year. First committee in October and then affirmed in December. And that is calling for effective measures for nuclear disarmament, including on or towards negotiations on a nuclear weapons convention, which would provide for the prohibition and elimination of nuclear weapons. The initiative came from the non-aligned movement, which has been supporting this idea for many years of a nuclear weapons convention. Many of the non-aligned countries were also very active in the negotiations last year on the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, but not all of them. The difference between those two approaches is the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons went ahead even without any nuclear armed states or allies, so it doesn't include any of them in it. Whereas a nuclear weapons convention would require the participation of nuclear armed states in particular. And the nuclear weapons convention would include not only prohibition, but also a phased process for elimination. Now, we understand that nobody expects that this high-level conference will start those negotiations, because the nuclear weapon states aren't prepared for that. So that's why the term effective measures was put into the resolution. And those effective measures are the range of measures that have already been debated in the Non-Proliferation Treaty review conferences, for example, on de-alerting, lowering the role of nuclear weapons, stockpile reduction, those measures, and encouraging the nuclear weapon states to take some measures along those lines. The specific agenda, though, for the high-level conference has not yet been adopted. Originally, there was going to be an organisational meeting today to adopt the agenda and to appoint the president and the vice presidents for the high-level conference, but that has been postponed until May the 10th. So May the 10th will then know what the specific agenda is for the high-level conference, who the president is and who the vice presidents are. From the civil society side, there is a call for progress on a number of different elements. One of those is to elevate, again, the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons and call on those states who have not yet signed to possibly use the occasion of the high-level conference, because they'll be represented at high level, to sign the treaty. But of course, that's really only going to be applicable to the non-nuclear states who are ready to do that at this stage. So there's also calls from civil society to lower the threat of nuclear weapons, to affirm the historical practice of the non-use, maybe to call for no first use of nuclear weapons if that's possible, that countries should never initiate a nuclear war. There will be other initiatives that could also be taken to the high-level conference. As I said, there's no set agenda yet, so all these ideas coming from civil society can help inform governments and hopefully engage governments in that.
Just Paul, do you know why the meeting was, the organizational meeting today was postponed?
Yeah, we understand that they hadn't yet decided on who the president and the vice presidents would be, nor the specifics of the agenda, so they needed some more time for further consultations.
Thank you. Nizar Aboud of Al Mayadeen Television in Lebanon. My question is regarding the Middle East. There is no more inflammable area as the Middle East. And as we know that the NPT revision in the last conferences, there was a major obstacle declaring the Middle East a non-denuclearized zone. How important do you believe this should come up, and whether it is on your radar or not, the issue of denuclearizing? And the Israelis came out of the closet some time ago, Olmert himself, and declared that we are nuclear. Then they put it back in the closet. how important such a question is to you and to the people of the world, of course.
I think the most important thing to happen is for the major nuclear powers to set a course, a concrete implementable course towards the global elimination of nuclear weapons. And I'm talking about China, India, Russia, United States. If that happens, then other issues like the South Asia standoff, the nuclear weapons issues in relation to Israel and in the Middle East generally, they will be much, much, much easier to solve. As far as the NPT review process goes, it's not really a subject of today's press conference, but it probably will be an issue again at the 2020 review conference.
Carla?
Oh, thank you. In view of the fact that the US, the UK, and France quite obstinately refuse to have anything to do with the treaty prohibiting the use, the possession of nuclear weapons, how do you expect to get them involved in something which would involve their observing Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which they're all violating, but it's the US, the UK, and France that are doing it most aggressively. So I got the impression that you expect them to be involved in this nuclear disarmament conference. How?
So at the moment, we don't yet know whether the P5 and the other nuclear armed states will attend the high-level conference and at what level. There have been questions asked in some of the parliaments, like the United Kingdom, for example, from parliamentarians, and the government has said they are holding off their decision to wait until they see what the agenda will be and whether there's a value in them coming. And in some of the private interactions that we've been having, some, like the UK, for example, has indicated that there could be some value in having such an event. But they have also mentioned that they would not attend an event that is only about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, because they can't support that. So at the moment, again, that's part of the fine-tuning of the agenda. And as the agenda has not yet been adopted, the nuclear armed states have not made a decision whether or not they'll come along. If it's a rather flexible agenda that doesn't preset the outcome, then there's more possibility that they would come along. Whereas if there's already a preset outcome that they can't agree with, then they would probably stay away. But we can't say more than that at the moment.
So I want to talk about the high-level conference from the point of view of civil society and not governments. We are living in a moment of possibly unprecedented danger to the future of our planet and the future of life on our planet. There are more simultaneous nuclear flashpoints around the world than at any time in history. We have very resurgent nationalistic, militaristic leaders in many of the most powerful states. And if ever there was a time when there was a need for a high-level summit, that means high-level, presidents, foreign ministers, it is now. And in fact, Mikhail Gorbachev, in an op-ed recently, identified that need and called for the UN to step up, for there to be a high-level summit or a Security Council summit or something. So one of the things I think we're here to say is that this opportunity should be seized upon by the nuclear powers, which are confronting each other now in a very, very dangerous way that threatens all of us. And and partly our letter to President Trump, President Moon, and Chairman Kim is we're supporting their high-level efforts to resolve what may be the most dangerous flashpoint at this moment. And as Alan said, this high-level conference could provide support and encouragement, because if it happens in May as scheduled, it's probably going to be between the North-South Summit, which is going to happen in April, and the U.S. North Summit that will probably happen in May. And I'm encouraged to say that today, because in light of Bolton's appointment, that's very worrying that he may very well try to derail this process. But this morning, Trump tweeted, "For years and through many administrations, everyone said that peace and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is not even a small possibility. Now there's a good chance that Kim Jong-un will do what is right for his people and for humanity. Look forward to our meeting." And I would like President Trump to read that back to himself and say there's a good chance that Trump, will do what is right for his people and for humanity.
Any other questions? Alex?
Hi, this is Siapak from Scan News. I've been at the UN quite some times, and I've seen these meetings, these gatherings for nuclear disarmament so many times, and it's really small steps one day after the other. And then somebody like Trump comes and push everything back years. What is your strategy in order to keep it moving without these kind of elements push it back? Thank you.
Well, I'll add one thing which reaffirms what Jackie just said, is that civil society have a very important role here. It's not just what the governments are doing. And this is part of why the Move the Nuclear Weapons Money campaign is becoming more prominent, because as civil society we can act on the budget issues, on the investment issues. We can learn also from some of the experience from the climate change issue, where divestment in fossil fuels is a tool which civil society is now starting to use effectively to shift the financial playing field and to give more support to renewable energies compared to fossil fuels. And here we're in New York City, which has decided to stop investment in fossil fuels. So we could see something similar happening, we hope, with the nuclear weapons, that a divestment campaign on nuclear weapons corporations could pick up, and that could help push the politics a little bit from that side as well. It doesn't answer the question about how to deal with leaders who are not exercising good leadership. We can encourage good leadership, but we can also act in civil society through our parliaments, through our civil acts of NGOs and partnering with others.
You know, I would just say one thing. I'm not an expert like my colleagues here, but I would say that having Trump as president, as explosive as it is spurring action by people that were not politicized.